I have long thought Christian organizations were horrible at marketing themselves. Growing up in the church, I was warned, and maybe you were too, about being too showy. Being a show-off was bad. If you excelled at anything and maybe had a little bit of well-earned pride, I bet you were told, now don't be arrogant. Everything comes from God. Make sure He gets the glory before you do. There's this weird fear about being too good. Christian girls are terrified of being smart because they'll run out of dating options in the church. Christian boys are terrified of taking the focus off Jesus and placing it on them. Don't even get me started on Christian music, that which I previewed in episode 1. Music that's not very good gets marketed as the Christian alternative to really good music. Can't listen to secular rock and roll and rap? Now you can listen to Christian rock and maybe rap. When your mission is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, anything that puts you or your brand out there feels secondary, almost not important. You have to, but you don't want to, or you're not allowed to. The dead tell for any Christian marketing. It's not designed very well, it's not written very well, and frankly, you don't want it very much. At least not as much as the secular alternative, but you're made to feel bad about that. So when a publishing company or a streaming app or a school enters the picture with stellar marketing, and you find out they're Christian, you think, is this even possible? You're so used to gimmicks and second or third rate products, your interest is immediately piqued. The boldness throws you off guard, but the way the ad is pulled together, the script, the creativity, and the message, you're hooked. You start thinking, maybe Christians can compete in the marketplace. Maybe we're not the alternative for parents who don't want swearing streaming into your ears and brain, leftist messaging infiltrating your hearts. Finally, a company that tells you like it is, with a bit of an edge and the remnants of a foul mouth. You consume everything. You buy into the system, you're convinced that this is what Christians have been doing wrong this entire time. We haven't been bold. It's refreshing to you, like a breath of fresh air. You don't notice, because of your infatuation, that the marketing has started to drift. Yes, they've got all the marks of a machine, snappy one-liners, beautifully put together books, and highly produced streaming series. But some of their stuff is questionable, using others as the butt end of their jokes. Publishing books and series you should be more worried about, if you weren't so infatuated. They make fun of other people, and their marketing starts losing track of their purpose, all of Christ for all of life. It seemed all is explained away by, do you know what time it is? We're destroying idols, not coddling them. It just feels so good to win. And that's not your purpose, because for so long, you lost. Welcome to episode 10, Marketing, or Why the Ends Justify the Means. In this episode, I'll talk with Aimee Byrd, one of those names used for Canon Press's marketing purposes, return to a conversation I had with Kristin, and introduce you to Nathan and Christiana Wells, residents of Moscow, Idaho. We'll interact with the marketing efforts of Canon Press and Canon Plus, how they market their schools, Lagos and New St. Andrews, the way they pitch their books, and the phenomenon known as No Quarter November. Maybe you're wondering why we started this series when we did. We took a page from Doug's book, We're Tearing Down Idols. Let's begin with a portion of the conversation I had with Aimee Byrd, whom you'll hear more from later on in this series.
My name is Aimee Byrd, and I am an author and a speaker. I was a member of the OPC, which is a Reformed denomination. So a lot of my reading audience coincided with a lot of fans of Douglas Wilson's writings. I was very aware of Doug Wilson and his writing. I believe I critiqued some of it on my blog before, particularly abuse stories or how his writing about hypermasculinity and the patriarchy affected women. But when I wrote my book, Why Can't We Be Friends?, which was a description of the brother and sister relationship of men and women in the church and how we can use that way that Paul addresses us to learn how to relate to one another as friends and as sacred siblings, promoting one another's holiness in the church. Doug Wilson really came after that. He wrote a critique for every single chapter in that book on his blog. And in a lot of ways, I mean, I just skimmed maybe the first few critiques because they all started sounding the same. He uses this like sexually charged language all the time. It's like he can't help himself. So, as he's maybe using some of my quotes about brother-sister language in scripture and what that means for us now, he would say things like, we need to remember that every gun is a loaded gun. And he's like talking about men, brothers in the church, in the same room as a woman. And so we're to think of them as loaded guns. And I just thought, wow, here you are using this overly sexually charged language. And so every article critique of his ended up pretty much saying, well, this is really nice to say, but, men want to have sex with women all the time.
Aimee, as you heard, has had her run-ins with Doug Wilson before. She's critiqued his work, among many others, and Doug has critiqued her work, mostly saying men and women can't be friends, they only want to have sex. Her more recent run-in with Doug Wilson's publishing arm, Canon Press, led to this.
It's the number one best-selling book on Amazon. And was it Canon Press that used that then?
They used the Aimee Byrd for a 20%. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. If you put in my name, then you got a 20% off discount. They were so happy that I tweeted that. So, yeah.
A Christian, quote unquote, Christian publisher utilizing, I come from fitness marketing and sales. This is my niche.
Yeah. Okay.
Using dirty marketing principles for their gain. And this is a quote unquote Christian publisher.
Right. And it just wasn't surprising at all. I mean, it was just shake my head when I saw it.
And you're not the only one.
How many people are going to do that and get this discount and read this book? Like, it just blows my mind that a book like that is so widely read and praised in the church. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah. No,
I'm the dangerous one.
Yeah, you're the dangerous one, even though I don't know everything. Obviously there is a know about marketing, but it is a field I was in before ministry.
Right.
And still technically am in. And the Canon Press, they are phenomenal marketers.
Oh yeah.
But in order to be phenomenal marketers, most of the time you have to be dirty. You have to be really, really dirty. Think if like a Gordon Gekko kind of stuff, Wall Street dirty. This is utilizing these marketing principles, these subversive principles, and making fun of somebody else in order to sell more of your books.
Yep. Kind of like the fighting feminism with potatoes was too, right?
Yeah. And they've done it more than just for you. So you can feel like you're part of an exclusive crowd.
I guess member of the club.
This is not a fringe thing anymore. It was formally denounced in NAPARC circles in the mid 2000s or so, and it has come roaring back. It's never been out of the reform circles. There's always been influence, but
there's always been.
Yeah, but it has come heavy and hot. The book she's referencing is It's Good to Be a Man. And as far as I know, there's no Canon Press book entitled It's Good to Be a Woman. They've got Even Exile, You Who, and a myriad of other titles, but men are those who are being attacked. So I guess we need a book to remind us why it's good, as opposed to bad, being a man. And part of their marketing strategy fell on their laps. Aimee Byrd responding to another post about this book and its message. Canon Press could not help themselves. They pounced. They used her name for 20% off the book. It's good to be a man because we can drag a woman's name through the dirt and use her as part of our marketing strategy. I imagine things wouldn't go well if Doug Wilson's name was used as part of a marketing strategy. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Anyways, here's the original trailer for It's Good to Be a Man.
I don't care if you're talking to a purple hair feminist or a guy that could bench press 400 pounds. Everyone's saying the same thing, that our young men in this country, they're not doing well. Now, some are comfortable being effeminate, but many are looking for guides. There's these guys that tell them the truth, that there was a world before feminism, and this is how women work. And some of it's good, a lot of it's really bad. And when they take that red pill and see the world for what it is, they get angry. They get angry because I won't be able to have what my father and my grandfather had. Yeah, you had a bad deal, and these things aren't all your fault, but you're still responsible for your response to the time that God has put you. So we want to help you to pave a way forward. We're going where Nehemiah took the people of Israel. They didn't rebuild Jerusalem in a night, but they were able to rebuild a wall. Together, we're going to fight with God against the sin in our own heart, the sin in this world, and we're going to be the men He made us to be. So let's do it.
Was Michael Foster, pastor of East River Church, which is now transitioning out of the CREC, the denomination that Doug Wilson founded. But that book, It's Good to Be a Man, must not have been selling very well if they needed a coupon code and a woman's name to boost their sales. While using Aimee's name wasn't originally part of their plan, it certainly became part of it. But it is ironic, selling a man's self-help book by putting down women. Well, it would be ironic if it weren't right on brand for Canon Press. Here's another sample of a Canon Plus marketing video, and feel free to go to our show notes if you'd like to watch it instead of only listening. We'll give Canon some good publicity, just not the publicity that they want.
Hey, Christian Dad. Are you paying a monthly fee to let Hollywood producers pump their septic tanks directly into your living room? Even worse, directly into your imagination and the imaginations of your children. How much darkness streams into your home every day, every week? Have you gotten too used to turning your mind off when you put your feet up? Have you invited your own enemies into your home? How much damage has already been done to you and to your family?
My heart says that the way I feel most myself is to go by the name Fred. That's because I'm non-binary.
Canon Plus is building a global platform with one simple goal: to create and deliver great content that will help Christian families grow stronger and more dangerous in the world. Content that will kick your brain's butt and help you bear down and step up. Content that will encourage, equip, educate, challenge, and inspire your family. Content built on the bedrock of real truth, real goodness, not fake trendy virtues.
How dare you!
And real, lasting beauty. Your family might already be struggling. Maybe the man of the house has been sipping too much Bud Light Gospel in the basement for too long.
It's day 6 of girlhood!
But it's not too late. With thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, truth-telling documentaries, and curriculum for all ages, Canon Plus wants to help you grow stronger, together with your family. There might be enemies at the gates, but there's a feast on the table to strengthen you for the fight. We want the resources we produce to help you do the real work of cultural change, becoming a lighthouse in your own community, armed with courageous joy and a faith that burns hot and bright, especially when the world would rather keep you on a cute little dimmer switch. We don't have to wallow in the world's filth.
Moonlight, Best Picture.
You are gay.
We don't need to let our strength atrophy like numbed victims of some ungodly matrix, leaving our families unprotected and vulnerable. It's time for Christian fathers to stop being such cultural cuckolds, well-behaved Wonder Bread winners sitting by and paying for the world to assault their families with lies. Let's get strong and grow our families strong. Let's raise our kids to be the world's worst nightmares. Smart, secure, fearless, joyful, difficult to control, and quick to laugh at lies and nonsense. We're pushing back against the rising tide of sewage on our screens. We're pumping out antidotes to the world's poisons. But we can't do it alone. We need allies. You need allies. So consider this your invitation to join up and make things a little awkward for all our weaker brethren in church leadership
It's not that we're against anything.
who so badly want to be worldly cool kids. Help us build a streaming platform unlike any other. A platform that will challenge and strengthen Christians, mind, body, and soul, until this cultural tide begins to turn.
She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
And yes, this tide will turn. This ain't the Alamo. We're all gonna die, but we have no intention of losing. Canon Plus. You don't have to subscribe, but you do have to stop sucking.
I'll continue beating this drum. Canon Press, Canon Plus, Doug Wilson, and everyone else would not exist in the form they do today without being reactionary. They love lauding themselves as fighters, as the bad boys and girls, as those who don't suck, as warriors for the truth and against the enemies of it. But they'd have no content if they never reacted to whatever is going on around them. If they had their choice, they'd be living in Christian Moscow. They're working on it, okay? But do this little thought experiment with me. What would they produce if that were the case? If everything around them was Christianized? If the country was truly Christian, whatever that means, what would they write? What would they film? How would they advertise? They're only good as long as culture is bad. Let me point something out to you. Marketing 101 is present a problem and give the solution. Always ask, what problem is Canon pointing to and what solution are they giving for it? I'll explain more, but here are 3 audio clips. Again, go to the show notes if you want the video that follow those principles. The first is a documentary series starring Cue My Shocked Face, Doug Wilson, on how to save the world in 11 simple steps from November 2022.
For most American Christians, the most visible thing that's falling apart is the old secular liberal order. This is something that sort of took root the late 19th century, and the seeds of its destruction were sown in the sexual revolution beginning in the 60s. And we started to bear fruit in our time. We got cancer earlier. We're in stage 4 now. And the patient is about to die.
We find ourselves having rented a bad movie. We're 30 minutes in, and we don't like it at all, so we rewind and try again. We can't just turn back the clock to 1950s Eisenhower America and say, okay, let's just freeze it there. The logic of our current rebellion was already at work, and the culprit is this dogma of secularism, that we can be good and right and decent and freedom-loving without Jesus. That's simply not the case. Christians have been told over and over and over, we've evolved, we've progressed to this point where a religious foundation for us here in the modern world is simply unthinkable. It's simply impossible. I'd say, well, it's still a free country. Watch me think it. The collapse of secularism should show us that we can't go back to a pretended neutrality. We have to realize it's Christ or chaos. And if you will not have Christ, you are embracing the chaos. The world needs saving. The answer has been given to us in the gospel. We have that answer. And so what are we to do? Well, we're to save the world.
The second is the trailer for Doug Wilson's 2022 book, Mere Christendom. See if you can spot the problem Doug is pointing out and the solution he offers. Doug starts off with an applause-worthy retort to a woman's cry, and then, in letters about 6 seconds into the video, from America's Most Hated Pastor, playing off what Catherine Stewart, from episode 5, aptly described as the Christian nationalist victim complex.
I hope my son is gay.
And I hope that Jesus forgives him just like he does the rest of us.
Doug Wilson, Moscow minister and columnist with the Idahonian Daily News.
The question that confronts us is, what does it mean in a disobedient culture to be prophetic?
There be a place for same-sex couples?
No marriage.
Even though it's the law of the land in the United States?
Just like Roe used to be. We want to turn the world upside down, and you don't turn the world upside down by being nice. I believe that we are in this polytheistic, pluralistic moment, and the desperate need of the hour is for our Christian leadership to say, Jesus is Lord, and there is no other.
Fear no man.
The next video is a more recent video starring Joe Rigney and the usual cast of characters. Doug Wilson, this will get old. Ben Merkel, his son-in-law. Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation, you might have heard of Project 2025. Meg Basham of Shepherds for Sale fame. And David Goodwin, president of Association of Classical Christian Schools, on Every Man's Guide to Institutional Sabotage.
Many of us lack certain things, but I will say in Washington, D.C., the good that is in the shortest supply is political courage.
It's not the progressive billionaire sitting over their shoulder, but it is Rachel Denhollander and Jamar Tisby and Russell Moore.
You might even call, I'm sorry, but you might call it a little bit the TGC gaze.
Yeah.
If you want a seat at the table, then these are the things you have to do. And a lot of people just nod and say, I guess this is just what I have to do to belong and to be important.
The accusation that had come at the head of school really related to whether or not he hired a woman or a man in a particular leadership position.
At Harvard, big letters all across the length of the building is, what is man that you are mindful of him?
Okay, yeah, right.
I think, oh, whatever else that president, that is glorious. Not because they're obeying it.
Right, it's an indictment.
It's an indictment.
The problem is out there. We've let it be for too long. Now we have to do something about it. Well, you have to do something about it and keep paying us money so we can keep telling you what to do about it. We'll stay in Moscow. You go. What Canon Press and Canon Plus do better than any Christian organization I know of is present you with a problem you either didn't know you had, knew you had and didn't know how bad it was, or knew how bad it was but needed the push to do something about it. Most Christian organizations either don't present you a problem to be fixed or present the problem you've never had. This is what makes Canon so effective. The problem is clear, and so are your marching orders, except Canon never gets dirty. You do. They just tell you the problem. You've got to fix it. Now for a more racy marketing ploy. What would you say if you're a pastor, or you heard of a pastor, who wrote a book about a sex doll? You heard me right. A sex doll. Yes, not advocating for a sex doll, but decrying the culture of sexuality by utilizing this sex doll. Pretty weird, right? Well, here's the audio for the trailer for this book. Tell me if you can catch talk about a sex doll anywhere.
I always felt like a spark in a world full of fumes. People who knew me, they weren't surprised. No one ever said, but he always seems so nice. Maybe they'll psychoanalyze me in books.
We have a breaking report of a gruesome murder in an East Denver recycling center. The suspect is in custody and the victim has been identified as local resident Sally Sassani.
But when everyone is insane, sanity looks like madness. My name is Asahel, and this is my story. The story of one spark in a world full of fumes.
Hey, big boy.
a safe word?
It's funny, this trailer wasn't viewed as often as other trailers on the Canon Press YouTube. I think it's because they weren't up front. I think they knew, they walked the line, didn't let the cat out of the bag before the book came out. So Canon has some boundaries around sex, sort of. But the sex issue is never the man's fault. Oh God, no. It's the woman's fault. She's as good as a sex doll. Well, at least the sex doll can't manipulate a man like a woman can. Good grief. But if you've bought into this system, you don't see this. You see a Christian publisher producing a novel about a sex doll. And yes, I know it's more than about a sex doll. And that's cool. You wished other pastors talked more about sex. And I respond, have you ever been to an evangelical church? That's all they ever talk about. Just never well. Doug presents you a problem you thought you had and sells you the book you never needed. Here's Kristin Dume, author of Jesus and John Wayne, whom I spoke with in episode 1, talking about Doug's marketing.
I've heard some things, but I don't have evidence. So yeah, clearly he's not short of funds. Nice thing is, really good production value. If you're stuck watching a lot of his videos, nicely done. Mm-hmm. And he really understands communication. Mm-hmm. He is extremely good at that. And I think what's interesting about him too is he built his own platform, and he didn't feel a need to go out to other platforms. He didn't feel a need. So he owns all of his material. He collects all of his own royalties, and he doesn't have to play by anybody else's rules. He developed his own distribution system, really important. So he has just built his own platform, and that has served him extremely well.
Congrats, Doug. You're pretty good at what you do. Nicely done. You're the best Christian marketer amongst a lot of horrible marketing. You're really good for a Christian publisher. Here's an example of Canon Press's self-marketing. They've self-labeled as outfitters of the Reformation.
What comes to mind when you hear the words Moscow, Idaho? Peas and lentils, rolling wheat fields, stunning Nat Geo landscapes, Northwest River supply. Maybe you have a cousin who had a friend who went to the U of I. Or was that Iowa? Yeah, probably. No Hawkeyes here. Just a few thousand vandals. Isn't that the place where those people were arrested singing psalms at a mask protest? Yep, that's us. And stay tuned. We're still kicking against petty tyranny. Maybe Moscow, Idaho makes you think of Logos School. One of the top K-12 schools in the world, has made its home in a repurposed roller rink. It gave birth to the worldwide classical Christian education movement. Hundreds of thousands of students have now gone through programs and curricula modeled on what happens in those classrooms. And then there's New St. Andrews College, that conservative Christian college with backbone. Tough in the classroom and tough in a brawl. That school where all the students know science. If Moscow makes you think educational Mecca, you're not wrong. And we won't even judge you for the cultural appropriation. If Moscow makes you think of an exploding Christian community, or those raucous fellas on CrossPolitic, or Doug Wilson, or the Bible Reading Challenge, or high-level Christian education, or fearless preaching, then you're thinking of the right town. And it all started with books. Books about family, about marriage, about faithfulness. Books about logic and rhetoric and biology. Books built on the one true foundation of any lasting community, the book. Your local gun shop might run short on brass. Walmart might have empty shelves where the 9mm should have been. But we will never run out of these rounds. Moscow, Idaho. Home to Canon Press and a home away from home for every family, church, school, and movement we have ever supplied in their pioneering. Canon Press, outfitters of the Reformation.
What comes to mind when you think of Moscow, Idaho? Probably not Christ Church, Canon Press, Doug Wilson, Logos School, or New St. Andrews, if you live outside of Moscow, Idaho, and are even remotely outside of the church scene. They like to think they're really important. But notice the way they self-describe. Logos School is one of the top Christian classical schools in the nation, and New St. Andrews is one of the nation's best liberal arts schools. Is their education top-notch? Yes, it is. But fun fact, New St. Andrews was not accredited until 2023. What are they also known for? Grooming of kids at Logos School, the multiple teachers who have been accused of unwanted advances or showing porn to their students, where the women are treated differently than the men, and likely less primed to go on to graduate work and contribution to society. That's for men. I'm sure there are pockets of vibrant communities in Moscow, Idaho, but not if you're a woman who doesn't fit the mold, nor if you've been accused of denying your husband sex when he's been beating you. But I digress. We'll get there. Here's another ad for New St. Andrews, the College of Christ Church.
Wanted. Young men to rebuild Western civilization. Must be unafraid of pain, blisters, intellectual rigor, and a lifetime of long shifts with swords and shovels, digging ditches, repelling invaders, and reading stacks of books taller than their fathers. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens or hand-wringing clergy, but always seeking to hear and heed the words of Lady Wisdom. Immune to the leadership of hypocrites and LARPing online masculinitods, unaffected by abusive authorities, petty professors, and all brokers of official respectability. Willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. Long-suffering joy and determination required. Must be willing to dwell among the tombs and graves of the long dead, seeking truths that cannot die. Exhaustion guaranteed. Conflict guaranteed. Mortality guaranteed. New St. Andrews College. Liberal arts for the undaunted.
This video made the rounds this summer because of Raise the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's middle finger. I'm less concerned about those issues, though sure, they're concerning. For one, Johnny Cash repudiated his actions later on in his life. The picture they have of him flipping the bird is from the late 60s, during Cash's more rebellious and less Christian face. Odd for a Christian publisher to valorize that. And the Jolly Roger is the flag hoisted on pirate ships. Weird. But the repelling invaders have a bunch of white dudes killing off a bunch of non-white dudes. My only guess for invaders are immigrants and foreign ideas infiltrating the church and Western society, to which they'd probably say both. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens. You pair this with wanted, young men to rebuild Western civilization, and you got who NSA is looking for. Boys scared of outsiders, and women who might be too much for them, and the right to subjugate them when women fall out of line. That's the kind of boys NSA is looking for, and it seems they've found them before. You see, I'll help you decipher their ads. The glossy exterior, the well-scripted prose, the snappy slides, they're as much a cover as Doug's own chuckle after he let slip another heresy. Easy to spot when you know what to look for. Here's another.
Federal money is for suckers. And in the world of suckers, Christian colleges are some of the very biggest. If only there were some folksy old cultural proverb that could warn them of the dangers. You know, something like, take the king's shilling, become the king's non-gendered institutional goo farm. Maybe then they'd turn down that sticky money. Maybe. New St. Andrews College. Not one federal dime since ever. Goo free. In person. This fall.
They're about as creative as Doug Wilson. They say the same things over and over and over again, and then hope you get offended, because then they get to sell more. So many assumptions undergird federal money is for suckers. I can't even begin to start. But they planned your emotions and the way you view the government. They've got to convince you the government is out to get you, which I can see, as well as we aren't. But we here at Sons of Patriarchy have too many stories to share for them to get away with that. You'll hear. Now, about that middle finger. Christians got all twisted into knots about the middle finger, and I get it. But let's hear from the creators themselves on why they posted Cash's favorite finger.
It's interesting. One of the strangest criticisms to me, my favorite, I should maybe say, instead of strangest, is just the delusions of grandeur. Like, who do you guys think you are?
Yeah.
No one gave you permission to save Western civilization. You don't have a permit for that. You've not been awarded any degrees in saving Western civilization.
It's called a Pentecost.
These people, yeah, and the dismissiveness of like, why are people upset? These people are clowns. Like, they're clowns. Ignore them. They're not doing this. This isn't even what they do. Yada yada yada. And I love that. And you know, I want to platform that especially because it's just, yes, please sleep on us. Like, sleep on this, please. Do believe that nothing positive could ever happen for Western civilization or nothing good could come out of Moscow. I mean, because I'm not that old. I'm in my mid-40s, but I was there pretty young when you started the first classical Christian school. It's like NSA was 94. And seeing the impact already of Canon Press's publishing reach, when my first relationship with Canon was Credenda Agenda, the little newsletter that I was being paid in donuts to fold and stuff into envelopes to go out. I've seen where this began. I've seen where it is.
Right.
I know that our graduates have been in rooms that they have no right to be in. Right. That our graduates are doing things that no one would think that they would be capable of doing. The hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students who have now gone through classical Christian schools because of a roller rink school in Moscow, Idaho. There's one little roller rink school still in that roller rink.
Right.
You know, not for long, but for now it is. And there are hundreds and hundreds of schools modeled off of that, teaching their kids, training their kids off a curriculum that came out of Canon Press and Logos School and Moscow, this Western Civ project, this building Western Civ.
So all you woke progressives, go back to sleep.
Go to sleep.
We're just a bunch of bozos.
Yeah, we're idiots. We have delusions of grandeur. We have no idea what we're doing. Meanwhile, if you have any young men who are really handfuls and, you know, cannot be tamed by your Sunday school pastor, send them our way.
Yeah, a young man full of testosterone who wants to get away from his lesbian parents.
You can take everything low T and we'll take everything high T and we'll be fine.
In this video, we've got Andy Wilson speaking, Doug's son, Jared Longshore, Doug's puppet, Ben Merkel, Doug's son-in-law, and Doug himself. They want your man, not your woman. Well, not quite. They want your man and woman, but the women are needed to produce more men. These videos exist for a single purpose, to grow their brand. Everything started with Logos School and New St. Andrews, the money vehicles. The marketing plan is for those to grow and Canon Press along with it. Christchurch is just a nice extra on top. The gospel, who cares? They need high T men who are being raised by lesbian parents. Okay, keep saying that to yourself. But now, the video and month that started it all. So influential, it's how we planned the entire series, under their nose, without them knowing. No quarter November, when Doug takes his gloves off and, well, I'll let him explain.
Hi, I'm Douglas Wilson. This is November 1st, 2018, and I wanted to explain to you what is meant by this no quarter November business that we're doing at Blog and Mablog in conjunction with our good friends at Canon Press. What I wanted to do is depart from my usual pattern of being balanced and reasonable. We thought it would be a good idea to try to go through November with a series of blog posts touching on subjects of controversy. The intention is to simply state the truth without qualification and see how the general public likes them apples. I think this is a necessary approach. I think we need to do this because as one of our local football coaches here in the Palouse puts it, we need to find and unleash our inner pirate. And that's the problem with Reformed evangelicals these days. It's not the job of the preacher to be a firefighter out in the world. We're not supposed to be running around putting out other people's fires. We're supposed to be arsonists in the world. So throughout the course of November 2018, check in to Blog and Mablog, dougwills.com, and if you see a post that has no quarter November in the tag, or it has a piratical flag of some sort, if you see one of those, it indicates that there will be some sort of unvarnished, unqualified, piratical behavior, and free books.
I'd encourage you to watch this video, give him a few more clicks, let him know we sent you. Maybe we can get him even more famous than he is already. I'm sure he'd like that. A pastor who lights things on fire because things are already so naturally flammable. Almost like the man can't help himself. It's a flammable world, and he so happens to have a match and eventually a blowtorch. Canon Press sells one, or at least they claim to. Really, look it up. It's a flamethrower. I bet you're shocked to know this, seeing as he's got an extensive controversy list. He can't help but market himself. He knows the videos and responses will follow. It's what he lives for. If he's not being talked about, he's got to stoke some more controversy. But that's why they market, to stoke controversy. They've got to show your need for what they sell and get you scared enough to buy it. And they'll do whatever it takes to do so. Here's a couple I spoke with who live in the Moscow area, and they'll talk about Canon's most viral marketing effort yet.
Well, my name is Christiana Wells.
And I'm Nathan Wells.
And I was first introduced to the Wilsons in my teenage years. My mom gave me some books by Nancy Wilson. And then later in life, I ended up living with several CREC gals in Santa Cruz, California. And one of those gals ended up moving to Moscow because of a desire to be under Doug Wilson's ministry and also some family connections she had. And we were on the mission field as a family about 8 years. And after we left, we needed to find a place that was affordable and small town and just a place for us to heal. And Moscow was on our radar. And we ended up moving here because we knew two families who actually were CREC families. So do you want to add to that?
Yeah, for me, it was actually, if I remember correctly, the first time I really heard of Doug was through a blog post by a seminary friend. He had written a 3-part blog post against Doug Wilson's view of American slavery. That was, the first time I really heard anything about him, and I was kind of just taken aback just by the radical nature of his views and really trying to justify the South and their view of slavery, as opposed to Scripture, seemed to just be not really caring what the Bible said, but kind of had his own idea to justify that the South was right and the South was on the moral high ground in the Civil War, or as they call it, the War of Northern Aggression.
They know this area, they love this area, and they're scared for this area. They've seen a lot, and they talk to a lot of people. They have many friends who go to Christchurch, Moscow, who send their kids to Logos School or New St. Andrews, and they know why. But the biggest marketing ploy Doug Wilson and co. have ever pulled came around the COVID pandemic. They planned this shtick for a while, and they pulled it off flawlessly. They pulled it off so well, Donald Trump took notice, and so did the world.
Yeah, and we know many people who moved up here during that time because of that stunt. And we know, Trump did tweet about it, I believe. Yep. So they got national, if not international.
So it worked.
It worked. But that was also the beginning of, like Nate was talking about, when the town really started to.
Yeah, but even before then, and we've said that, the community, there's many good people in the Christchurch community. They're very generous. Like with us coming off the field, they gave a scholarship to our kids to go to the school. We had some hesitations, but it was a Christian school. It seemed like a good transition especially for our daughter. And they were so generous. But even back then, when we first came, we'd meet people. It's a very friendly town. And so you talk to people, just, you meet, oh, how's it going? And you actually say how you're doing and interact. And when they would say, oh, where your kids go to school? And we would say Logos, we could visually see their face change. And the conversation would soon be over. We got pigeonholed because our kids were in Logos, and it kind of broke relationship before there even was a relationship. And it was really weird. I've never seen a community that's so polarized about a church, or a church that's in the news, and then all the comments on the news, Facebook page are like, oh my goodness, people hate what is going on. It's so weird. And that was part of the reasons we end up leaving Logos as well. Not just the legalism, the
spanking policy.
Yep. Yeah, we'll get into those. Yep.
Oh man, like there was a lot of reasons that we ended up leaving, but even from the very beginning, it was like, what is going on? This is weird. This is not normal.
Yeah, and coming from a missionary context, which gives you a different look at how the church is viewed amongst people who may not know the church, the teachings, whatever, and then to go to an ostensibly Christian town or church, whatever people want to call it, and then just see how poorly it's looked at by everybody else must have been a little jarring coming from your context.
Yeah, no, it was super weird.
And regardless of opinions about masks during the pandemic, we, as missionaries, we actually interacted with a lot of non-Christians, our neighbors, people we would meet. And to us, wearing a mask was a witness to us, because we knew if we were having a conversation with them, and we had people in our home and we talked about Jesus. And if they were to meet us on the street in downtown Moscow without our mask on, we knew that would affect our witness and testimony before them. In the same way, when we were in Cambodia, if we were doing things that were so countercultural that were not necessary, it would actually impede our witness for Christ. And so we wore masks actually as a testimony and a witness to the world around us. And so it was just so counter to our own understanding of what it means to live in the world. And so
in Christ we're free to have rights or give up our rights. Like our rights are not the number one priority.
No,
our number one priority is to share Christ with those around us. And so whether that's in Cambodia and needing to lay down our American rights or our sense of what's right and wrong, but it ends up just being kind of more of a cultural thing, right? That here in the States, it was my rights as an American are not, they're secondary. They are to be submitted to the Lordship of Christ and to demand those rights and to see the testimony of the gospel just being degraded before our eyes with Christ Church. It was horrible to watch that this thing about masks and vaccines was becoming the priority. It was the goal, the freedom to do whatever we want as Americans. You can't tell me what to do versus I can.
Yeah. I may disagree with this, but I'll submit because I'm submitting
but
to
it's
Christ
okay.
above all else.
And I think even some churches, they sued their city. I think that's, even as an American, that's our right. We can.
You have that right to do that. Yep.
If that's what you choose as an elder board, there are things that, as Americans, that's your right. But I think just it was different here because it was so antagonistic. It was so it was like a war, like a fight.
Yeah.
There wasn't love. There wasn't even thinking, for the mayor, like everyone in government positions, it was not an easy situation.
No.
None of them knew what to do. It was very difficult. And so even compassion for those that were leading us, there was none. It wasn't like, man, this is a hard situation. This has never happened in our lifetimes. And so I understand it's hard to make decisions and hard to make those calls. Wow, I would not want to be in your position where whatever you do, someone's going to hate you. How can I pray for you? How can I, support you in that? And I might not agree with you. That's okay. But it just felt like the rights became the number one thing. And it wasn't about Jesus. It wasn't about the gospel. It was about freedom as Americans. And all the people that were getting attracted, it was all these rebels, like just people with rebellious spirits. And man, if you look in scripture, that is not what we're called to be. I mean, Israel, they rebelled. God was not happy. It did not go well for them. And that spirit of rebellion is not something that I think is Christ-like. We have the example of, the martyrs. Man, that was not right. What was happening to them? Stephen, James, and that was not right. Jesus, it was not right. That was the most wrong thing ever to happen ever. And yet he did not hold on to his rights. He gave them up. And so did those who followed him. They gave up their rights. And it was more of a plea, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. It was not this, how dare you stone me to death, you infidels, like it was not anger. They were not filled with anger. It was,
and they weren't being stoned to death because they were not masking up as being there. They were being stoned to death because they were proclaiming the gospel to the people.
Yes, that Jesus Christ was the risen Savior, Messiah.
That was the reason for being stoned. Yeah.
Yes.
And I would say that the warlike vocabulary is almost laughable. They have their bookstore. What is it called? This stone, or is it called the
Sword and Shovel?
Sword and Shovel.
Yep.
And even that name, that choice of a name, it's always about violence and war and aggression. It feels, and even some of the Kirkers housing. I was driving along a back road, and I saw this big sign that said something housing development coming soon. And there was a massive sword going through the middle of this. This is an image of a sword. And I thought, that's probably a Kirker.
The logo.
The logo.
Mm.
And it turned out to be. It's about fighting and war. And it comes out in so many different ways.
And towards the community, it's felt like, I remember when that bookstore opened, it's kind of a newer bookstore, and a friend kind of joked, what are they going to do? Kill me and bury me? Like Sword and Shovel, like it
maybe
it becomes like a joke in the community. Like it's so offensive and so like aggressive.
And we realize that it's probably from a biblical, probably from what Nehemiah and the wall.
Yeah, they're trying probably the sword and trowel.
But they got to run it through their PR or something. So
yeah. Well, I think they did, and that's why they put it out.
Maybe.
But they really there seems to be no thought for others.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just reflect in their politics, that reflects in their marriages, that reflects in their children and how they treat their children, how their children treat others. It's a theme that we have seen, just that there's no room for outside opinions or even to consider or be curious about other opinions. So
yeah, it's a warlike mentality, them against the world.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone that's not them is like them. They're going to fight. They're not seeing. I mean, honestly, it's more like Jonah, right? And as a missionary, you struggle with that when you're in a different culture, you can begin to hate the people that God has sent you to. Just like Jonah. Jonah was sent to Nineveh, and he hated them.
Mm-hmm. Turned around.
He wanted them to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And that can happen. I'm not trying to, come off as like better, but you need to fight that. No, the world is not our enemy. We are to preach the gospel. They're us. Like it's forgetting, like who are we? That we are sinners saved by grace. We're not better than anyone. And so you start getting this attitude of us versus them. You forget the very core of the gospel and who we even are as Christians, that we are no better. We have nothing. All we have has been given to us as a free gift from Jesus. And it gives us no place for boasting, no place for looking down on those who don't know Jesus around us, but only compassion. And I often thought, like, at the end of Jonah, God says, should I not have compassion on them? They don't even know their left from their right.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what they're doing. Like, why are we expecting them to act differently?
Mm-hmm.
They don't follow Jesus. Why are we expecting them to act like they're following Jesus when they don't? And just a breakdown of the gospel, really at its core, that it becomes this Christian community bubble against the world. And that's not what Scripture has presented. It's go into all the world and preach the gospel. Like, that's our mission. It is not to take over a town. It is not to take over a nation. It is to go and preach the gospel. That's what our mission is supposed to be. And it's a mission of love. It's a mission of compassion. It's a mission of understanding that person across the street is me. There's no difference. We're both sinners and we both need Jesus. And so when when it's become such an adversarial relationship with the town, it's just heartbreaking.
We won't get into everything that happened between the police, legal system, city of Moscow, and Christchurch, but suffice it to say, it worked. Gabe Wrench was arrested and vindicated, and people came streaming to Moscow to find the church that borrowed Cash's favorite finger and pointed it at City Hall. They sang psalms outside and called it a protest. They used the psalm saying and the attention that they would get to grow and stick it to the man. Evangelical leaders took notice and lauded Christchurch for their muscular opposition, for the backbone few other pastors had. And what did everyone fail to hear throughout? What about your witness to Christ? They mocked government regulations and pulled out their phones for the world to see. But it worked. They got what they wanted. There's a verse somewhere in the Bible that talks about this. Galatians 1:10. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Seems relevant. Here are 2 clips from that psalm sing. Again, I encourage you to go to our show notes for the video and watch for yourself. The first is the hymn, Oh, for 1,000 Tongues to Sing.
Please bless these people back here. In Jesus' name, amen.
Here's the second psalm, Psalm 2.
1, 2, 3. Nations and they take their stand against our God's Messiah. They claim they will not keep his binding chains. The one enthroned in highest heaven higher mocks them to scorn, on them derision rains. He speaks to them in righteous holy wrath. God vexes them and shows his great displeasure. Yes, so I set my king upon the path that upward bound to Zion, my own treasure. You are my son, today you are begotten.
What you'll notice about these two videos, if you watch them, is the intention isn't worship. It's what Christ Church calls worship as warfare. They practice it a lot. Singing is war. Singing fights. Phones raise up all across the crowd and they take videos and pictures of the group singing. I'm going to wager this doesn't happen during their Sunday morning worship service. So, why do they lift up the Jolly Roger then? They're making a statement and want everyone to listen. We're disobeying and we want you to know it. I bet they weren't shocked when the world did, because that's why they market what they do. They want the world to pay attention. They want the world to look at this bunch of Christians and mock them because it means their marketing is working. If Christians mock, they're just not used to this kind of guerrilla marketing. Here's a town hall the day after the psalm sing with Ben Merkel, Toby Sumter, and Doug Wilson.
I do think that that's an important question because I think that there are, if you're one of the students, you have, I think, a few different questions in mind. One is, should I go? The second question is, if I go, there are different strategies of behavior. You could go and cheerfully just keep your 6 feet of distance and you would be just fine. And or you could go and stand next to other people and see what happens, or you could go and ostentatiously hug your best friend in front of the police officer, baiting the citation.
Happened yesterday.
As might have happened yesterday.
You can ostentatiously hug your best friend, Ben Merkel suggested, to which Doug Wilson chuckled, as happened yesterday. Toby Sumter then came in with the as might have happened yesterday, because these psalm sings were planned and multiple at that. Sure, some people might have done this with a worshipful heart, thankful that their church was meeting in person, though this wasn't on a Sunday, but others lifted their voice as if it were the middle finger and pointed it towards town hall. In all these marketing ploys, the goal is always the same. Rile them up and show them the problem. If enough people are worried, they'll buy the solution. Because for Doug Wilson and friends, it's all about marketing, or why the ends justify the means. Success can be a terribly addictive drug. The more you experience it, the more you want it. But that drug needs bigger and heavier hits to continue that same effect. The hits never get better, but the dose gets harsher and harsher. You become a victim of your own success. So it goes with marketing. You've tried for so long and nothing works, but controversy fans the flames of popularity. In the Christian tribe, success in marketing is difficult to come by, mostly for lack of effort and know-how. So when someone's good, really good, the hits come harder and faster. You'll begin cutting corners, throwing people under the bus, putting up content more for yikes than the yes. You begin catering to one audience at the expense of another, but you're not thinking in these terms. You think, of course they don't get it. They're the libs, the woke, the progressive, the tyranny of the left who can't handle the Trojan horse of truth steamrolling into their palaces. But it gets easier to put the product before people, success in ministry above caring for others. If a woman is hurt by advertising, that's because she's not used to masculinized church and authority figures. As long as you end the commercial with all of Christ for all of life, you're good. Kind of like a horrible prayer when you wish all sorts of curses on those you hate and end it with, in Jesus' name, amen. It sanctifies your prayer. It makes you feel better about yourself. Success is a hell of a drug. But the Christian faith isn't the result of a successful marketing strategy, a win-at-all-costs ploy. In fact, it's the worst marketing strategy possible. A Messiah who comes from the wrong side of the tracks brings together 12 people with the worst resumes. No one gets what he's doing for the 3 years of his public ministry. Everyone doubts him, and at his crucifixion, everyone leaves. Did Jesus even care about marketing himself? When he died, it's like nothing he said made an impact on anyone. They sulked. When he rose, some still doubted. If Jesus was following the Roman system of marketing, he would have kicked Caesar off his throne and established his kingdom, and then probably picked a better set of disciples. But that's because Jesus wasn't interested in himself. He came to give his life a ransom for you and I. He made himself small so he can make you big. And for as horrible as his marketing strategy was, it worked. 2,000 years later, the Christian faith is the largest in the world and growing faster. His life wasn't an ends justify the means, but how and why he lived his life in perfect obedience and with a perfect love that he might secure your end. That's why ends don't justify the means, because you know the end, so the means matter too. I want to thank Aimee Byrd, Kristin Kobes-Dumais, and Nathan and Christiana Wells for their time and sensitivity. I hope you learned something from this episode. Next time on Sons of Patriarchy, we look at the theology of Doug Wilson. This will get technical, and it's not for everyone. But bad theology leads to bad consequences. That's episode 11, Reformed is Not Enough. See you then. Sons of Patriarchy is brought to you by the administrators of Examining Doug Wilson in Moscow in partnership with Peter Bell. It's written, produced, and edited by Peter Bell. Original music, sound design, and mixing by Aaron Feeney. This series wouldn't be possible without the dozens of abuse survivors whose bravery and vulnerability make it what it is. Every episode was sent to them before being published, and their feedback, edits, encouragement, and eventual approval make this what it is. May your voices be heard far and wide. Thank you.